I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a macro economic analyst, brilliant guy who came on many months ago and brought up this Chris Martenson chart about the exponential function of money. It's at some point it's going to go straight up. I think we were down here, when he said we are here, right? I said, no, we were here. And he's talking about the exponential function of money printing. And, the Fed had shrunk its balance sheet back to $3.7 trillion. And it was going from $4.5 trillion backwards. And they were burning cash. And they had the opposite of QE. They had quantitative tightening. And, man, that looked like they had it going on. And they really didn't. And I'm talking about Rob Kirby. Rob Kirby, thank you for joining us today on USA Watchdog. Where are we on this chart now, Mr. Kirby?
I think we're off the page in the upward motion.
The balance sheet of the Fed was 3.7 trillion, and you think that's ancient history, and that was in September.
Yeah.
And where are we now with it now?
Yeah, but understand, Greg, the official amount of money, the Fed's balance sheet is closely tied to what most people perceive as money supply. And the official money supply does not take into consideration $21 trillion in missing money that is documented by Catherine Austin Fitts and Dr. Mark Skidmore. So if you actually add the 21 trillion that went missing from the years 98 to 2015, that picture looks a little different than what it currently looks like. And then we have the subsequent years to 2015, where Dr. Skidmore has sent me some work he's currently doing concerning the year 2019, and it appears that quite possibly as much as 10 trillion might have disappeared in 2019 alone. So we're talking about many, many, many trillions. And then there's, the 21 trillion plus a conceivable additional 10 trillion in 2019. That's the part of the money creation that we don't get to see. There's no transparency on that at all. What we do get to see, though, Greg, is the Fed has, in the last 3 months, reversed their quantitative tightening and are now expanding their balance sheet once again. And their balance sheet has grown from, call it 3.7 trillion at the beginning of the year, and it's through 7 trillion right now. And it's projected to get as high as 10 to 11 trillion by the end of the year. So we have money creation happening in spades. And, with it, we have a lot of games that are the gamesmanship that's going on to try and obfuscate the rampant monetary debasement knows no end. And, I call it a big game of it's Keynesian quackery with money. And I call it a grand game of hide the salami. And these guys at the Fed who model everything and who are very aware how damaging the money creation that they've undertaken, they know exactly how debilitating it is to the fiat money regime that they manage, which is why they try to intervene in our capital markets to stunt the advance of anti-dollar, natural anti-dollar trades, whether it's the precious metals, gold and silver, or the crypto marketplace, best expressed by Bitcoin in this day and age. But these things are all basically, they're all viewed by the monetary officials as kryptonite to the dollar. And they all represent anti-dollar trade.
These riots, and I wanted to kind of use this as a backdrop. The Fed didn't. I wouldn't ever intimate that the Fed even started these riots, but boy, they're looking at, wow, what a smokescreen we have. What a smokescreen we
Well,
have to. They just May 15th, because that's the coronavirus too. Another smokescreen. They just made the banks have zero reserves in the banks. It was a Federal Reserve website document. Zero reserves. It couldn't be any clearer. Banks don't have to have any reserves at, I think the exact terms, but they don't have to have any reserves at depository institutions. And now we have all this rioting going on. And if the currency blows up, the rioting will go on to a full blown civil war.
I mean, Greg, it appears that way, and quite interestingly, we're finding that in all the Democrat-controlled cities across America, mysteriously, at the flashpoints where these demonstrations are happening, we are seeing pallets of bricks being mysteriously left in areas where there's no construction, no work underway, and mysteriously these pallets of bricks are being dropped and left at flashpoints. And these are the bricks, Greg, that are flying through the windows of shopkeepers, and being hurled at police, and it's almost, Greg, as if somebody somewhere wants to provide these uppity demonstrators with ammunition and have it ready at hand.
Well, let's call them what they are. It's Antifa. They are subverting America. They're attacking business of America. They want to overthrow the country. These are some version of communist, fascist, communist, Marxist, whatever it is. And if you disagree with them, you're a white supremacist. If you disagree with them, you disagree with Black Lives Matter and the whole thing. You should hear Larry Elder talk about the whole idea that black people are being abused around the country. It's unbelievable. It's just not happening, he says. He's a black Greg, commentator. But anyway, this is all part of communism. And you were telling me in the pre-interview that central banking is a part of communism?
Well, central banks are the central plank of the Communist Manifesto. I mean, central banks are materially necessary in a communist system. They are what communism is built around. And isn't it interesting that the desecration of our current money system, our fiat money system with compound interest, its desecration is being accomplished by a central bank, namely the Federal Reserve. And it appears to me, at least, much of what's occurring in America in a negative way is all being funded by or at the behest of groups with communist leanings, namely Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and any other group that George Soros seems to be attached to or lends his name to and his money to. Because somebody, Greg, is paying to have the bricks delivered and planted in these jurisdictions where these yahoos are creating problems. And you see, at the end of the day, it sure seems to me, and a lot of other people that are paying attention, that the demonstrations and the civil unrest has very little to do really with anything regarding the unfortunate and untimely and disastrous, and I'll call it what it is. It was the murder of an innocent black person. But burning down churches and throwing rocks through the shops of black shop owners does nothing to remedy that injustice and that disgusting act. So here we are. But who's coming into what effectively resembles a war zone? I mean, pallets of bricks don't grow to the pavement. Somebody's going into these areas. You need a forklift to take a pallet of bricks off a truck and to plant them somewhere.
Yeah.
Who's orchestrating this?
Well, they had a team of people in my town go to. They were protesting downtown, about 3 or 4 miles away, and then they found a mattress store, and they burned it down to a black hole. Because why would they go to a mattress store? Because it's full of foam rubber.
Well,
And so that's what they did in
go.
my town a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And you know what the cops did? Nobody got arrested.
Yeah.
They're pushing them out of downtown as they're busting out the windows. They must have busted out 50 windows in downtown Greensboro. These are all Democrats downtown. I mean,
Well, Greg,
these are
let's
all
just put
black
it this
people
way.
and Democrats, and that's who's
Greg-
getting destroyed.
Greg,
Unbelievable.
in the aftermath of 9/11, Greg, it was no more than 2 or 3 days after 9/11. We had officialdom tell us that they knew that who the perpetrators were, because they knew and were able to track down the whereabouts or the origin of under $100,000 that was allegedly wired to the largely Saudi Arabians. I believe 18 out of 19 of the people who hijacked planes on 9/11 were Saudi Arabian nationality. And they were able to track down where less than $100,000 had come from, its origins, to fund these people to take plane lessons to learn how to fly a Cessna.
Without learning how to land.
Without learning how to land, of course. But I mean, but where's the money coming from to pay for bricks? Why is it, Greg, when $50 billion disappears at the behest or at the hands of Bernie Madoff, we have no clue where a nickel of it went, and we have no clue who's financing or buying these bricks and having them deposited in strategic locations that conveniently can be picked up and hurled at law enforcement officers with this civil unrest that's occurring.
Yeah, they're shooting at them on Monday night. They were shooting at killing cops. They were shooting at cops. I mean, running them down. I think they should turn this into the actual battle that it is, and I think they should start shooting them. They're not protesters. They are paid paramilitary people who are attacking America.
Absolutely, Greg.
That's who they are.
This is organized, orchestrated insurrection that's occurring, and it's planned and it's financed by let's just say near-doers and people who do not have America's best interests at heart.
You were talking about the gold and silver market and the crypto market. I mean, they are being mercilessly attacked.
Well, they're attacked on a regular basis, Greg.
It doesn't seem like they get the same bang for the buck, though. They try to push gold down, and they can't push it down. They try to push silver down. They've been more successful with silver, and then it's still under $20 an ounce, which I think it's outrageous. I mean, with the gold silver ratio is something like 95, 100. I mean, I think it hit 100 and almost 130 ounces of silver to make an ounce of gold. Now it's around 100, 95, 98, something like that. But this attack on gold, silver, cryptos, why?
Because these are the alternatives to the dollar, and in light of rampant dollar debasement, these are the things that you would naturally expect to rise in value, and they are rising in value, and they will continue to rise in value over time. But this morning was a great example of the type of interventions we see. This morning we have, or at the time of taping anyway, Greg, we've got the price of gold down roughly 0.5%. We've got the price of silver down roughly 2%. And we've got the price of Bitcoin from its early morning highs down better than 7%. And I'm just going to suggest to people that want to pay attention that the severity or the percentage drops in these three things just mentioned are a very good measure of the fear that these three entities put in the minds of our monetary authorities. These things are kryptonite to the current fiat money regime, and the powers that be are absolutely scared out of their britches that any one of these could rise at any kind of a pace where it might become manic. And I mean, Bitcoin, for instance, Bitcoin in the last couple of days has been very aggressively moving up. And that's why it was attacked to the tune of $700 in less than 15 minutes this morning, because its move up was starting to scare the living daylights out of monetary authorities. At other times, silver has moved up very aggressively, and it needs to be harnessed or whacked back. It's like a perpetual game of whack-a-mole with these monetary authorities. And anytime gold, silver, or cryptos, all dollar alternatives, anytime they show too much strength, they are attacked. And all I'm saying, Greg, like in the last week, for instance, Bitcoin's been moving up very aggressively. And if somebody wanted to relieve themselves or liquidate a position in Bitcoin, all one would have to do is sit on the offer, and they would be taken out of their position over a matter of hours or maybe a day. But to liquidate a position in Bitcoin and hammer the price down $700 in 15 minutes, whoever did that was not trying to maximize the return on what they were holding. It was done for effect, Greg. And that's what's selling down an entity like Bitcoin, $700 inside of 15 minutes. It's for effect. It's not to maximize return. We see similar things occur in the silver market, and we have at times, and many times over the years, seen the same sort of thing occur in the gold market. But, I mean, in light of the amount of monetary debasement that's occurring, these attacks tend to be extremely short-lived. They tend to be very extreme in nature, and the recovery time is dramatically shortened from what it would have been for a market to recompose itself, say 5 or 7 years ago. An attack on gold 7 years ago, where the price would be dropped dramatically in a space of minutes or an hour, it would take the gold market. Many times it would take weeks, if not months, for the market to recompose itself and move higher again. Now we see the market recompose itself and move higher in a matter of minutes. We see the same thing in the crypto space, and we see the same thing with silver in particular. The attacks are vicious. The recovery time is becoming shorter and shorter every time one of these vicious attacks occurs. And of course, regulators who are sworn to uphold and protect the little guy from such market manipulations, they sit on their hands, and it's hear no evil, see no evil, and carry on camping, guys. It's regulators that refuse to regulate that allows this to continue. And the reason regulators sit on their hands, Greg, is because these attacks are organized and orchestrated by officialdom, namely, it's the U.S. Treasury itself, or the vestiges of the U.S. Treasury, namely the Exchange Stabilization Fund that acts on the Treasury's behalf clandestinely through the New York Federal Reserve, that intervenes in our capital markets to make the dollar look pretty when it's being desecrated by the people who are sworn to uphold its value. So that's the reality. We have a dollar that's being desecrated by the people who are supposed to be protecting its value and are sworn to uphold its value. And the way they do that is to desecrate anything that's viewed as an alternative or a viable alternative. And that involves interventions in our capital markets where orders come from the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Those orders are given to the New York Federal Reserve Trading Desk, and those orders are then disseminated to the likes of J.P. Morgan, Citi, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and Goldman Sachs, who are the operatives in the capital markets, or the henchmen who execute Fed monetary policy.
Is it?
And it's rude and it's crude and it's done on a regular basis.
But you know what? It's the effects are lessening. I mean, they do this 7-8 years ago at the level they're doing it now. You might get $50-$75 off an ounce of gold, and like you said, it may not come back for weeks, months. Now it's like, they get $8, $9, $10, and the next day it's up 15. And what do you make of the reason why it's reconstituting itself so quickly after an attack? I mean, in some cases, minutes. In other cases, a couple of days. What do you owe that Bitcoin, silver, and gold are reconstituting themselves? And I mean, they'd like them to be a lot lower than they are. They didn't get that. I mean, gold is up $400 or $500 year over year. Why is it not working as well?
The reason it's not working as well, Greg, and the reason that the recovery periods are so short is because the amount of money that's being printed is blinding. You see, it goes back to that vertical curve. We're off the page upwards with money creation, and the amount of money that's being thrown onto it's Greg, it's really akin to if you throw a lot of fuel on a fire, it's harder to put the fire out, and it requires more water, more energy to extinguish the fire, the bigger the fire gets. Money printing is fuel for the fire. And the fire that's really happening, it's the American currency that's burning. And it's going to burn to the ground because too much fuel is being added to the fire. And the fire is going to get bigger, and the anti-dollar trades remain purchase of physical precious metal and crypto. Those are the two or three primary areas where the anti-dollar trade expresses itself. I mean, it expresses itself in other things too, as in storable food, the demand for weaponry. The demand for tangible stuff, and we're seeing, and sure enough, we are seeing shortages. We're seeing empty shelves in terms of storable food in grocery stores. We're seeing this express itself in the tangible arena across the board.
I was at Costco yesterday. Where's your toilet paper? Where's your toilet paper? I asked. We sold out this morning. We sell out every time we put it on there. People are freaking out about toilet paper. I'm freaking out.
Greg, it's becoming
in Costco.
Difficult to find. Greg, it's becoming difficult to find flour in the grocery stores. Bottled water is in very short supply at different times. Flour. These are essentials. These are building blocks. These are the things you bake a loaf of bread from. These are things that most people, get comfort from if they have what they perceive to be an adequate store on hand. And these are the things that people go to first. I mean, try buying in today's world with the convenient. I call it convenient spread of this virus. Try buying an N95 mask. Try buying hand sanitizer. These are other things tangible that people get utility from. These things are in short supply, and when stock becomes available, it disappears very quickly. But I mean, that's really no different, Greg, than physical silver, physical gold, and Bitcoin. They disappear really quickly too. And their values keep going up over time and will continue to keep going up over time because they are the essence and embodiment of the anti-dollar trade. And dollars are becoming more plentiful as time passes. And with the Fed's balance sheet expected to hit 10 or 11 trillion by the end of the year, That means there's going to be another $4 or $5 trillion floating around in the economy, the global economy, that's going to need to get soaked up somewhere. And, people aren't going to mortgage-backed securities, even though the Fed's buying those at par with U.S. Treasuries, because corporate tenants can't pay their rent because their businesses have been shuttered.
And in California, I'm glad you brought that up. It's coming out on Zero Hedge. California faces financial collapse as it moves to allow businesses to walk away from commercial leases. So they got a free button in Sacramento at the State House. They got to just press the free button, and nobody has to pay. It's okay. It's the biggest state in the union that they just passed. They just said that you could just walk away. I mean, this is unbelievable. Look what's happening in downtown Manhattan. I mean, they had the Rolex store pilfered of hundreds of thousands of dollars of watches of product. I mean, how do you recover from that? What are the cops doing? They're just you're running around and they got this. They went Macy's. How can you? Have you ever been to Macy's in Manhattan? It's huge. It's multi-stories, and they looted the thing. What do they do?
I've been there.
They should be shooting these guys. This is not a protest. This is an attack on the businesses of America. This is an attack and this is in the middle of downtown, in the middle of urban areas. This is hurting black people, people of color. I don't get it why people of color would vote for a fascist, communist Democrat. They don't care about you. Anyway.
Greg, communists don't see color.
I don't know how anybody could. I mean, they used to be the working man's party. Now those people are showing up at Trump rallies. The union representatives who are all, the bosses, they're all bought off. But the guys working are like, wow, this is, what do we do? We're going to send jobs to China? You think I should be in the, what? I mean, and what do you think about the whole China thing being over? I mean, do you think the China thing is over?
Do I think the China thing is over? No, not for a heartbeat, Greg.
No, I don't mean the China trade. The China, them sucking all this money out of us after all these years.
Yeah, well, you know what? China is working with globalists, and the globalists have a communist backbone, and the China communism, free trade concepts are all intertwined, Greg, and these things come together, and they're all about destruction of America as we have known it, because before you can have a globalist new world order, Greg, you need to destroy the old order, and the old order is the America that we grew up knowing and respecting, and that needs to be destroyed before a new world order can be instituted, run by these globalist hacks. These Keynesian quackmeisters. These people are brutal. And you know what? The sooner we get our heads around the notion that we are being set up by a group of narcissist, power-hungry,
godless
Keynesian fools, the better off we're going to be. Because, globalism is the true enemy of humanity, and it's the true enemy of America. And America needs to wake up to this and get their heads around it very, very quickly.
Where do you think the prices, I mean, obviously they're going to go even way up. I mean, I had Bull Pony on not long ago. He says, they're going to go up, and when they rise up, they're going to get whacked. And then it'll start over again. They won't be able to whack them down completely. He kind of says the same thing you do. Then they go up some more. Then they'll get whacked, and then they're going to go up some more, and then they're going to get whacked. I mean, is that the pattern we're going to get? Prices going up, then the interventions, and then they put it down, and then they go on back up like whack-a-mole. Is that what you see?
Greg, with the amount of money that's being created, the day is coming, and it's fast approaching, in my view, where the global community will refuse to accept dollars in trade. Because the rate at which the Federal Reserve is creating money, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, the rate at which they're creating money and the number of trillions of new money they're creating, if you're a foreign entity and you want to trade internationally, why should you accept a currency in exchange for your work, your effort, and your natural resources? Why should you accept a currency in return that the conservators of won't even tell you how much of it exists? So this is problematic, and there will come a time when foreigners will say no more dollars in trade, and at the same time they won't say they won't trade with America. They'll say, fine, you guys want to create untold trillions of money and don't want to share with us how many trillions you've created, and you want to play a game of hide the salami with your currency. Well, that's fine. You can pay us in something other than dollars. Maybe they'll demand payment in gold. And my question to you, Greg, is when a country like China, like Russia, or like the European Union says to America, you've created too many dollars. We don't understand anymore what a dollar is really worth. We want payment in something other than dollars. Will these clowns who've destroyed your currency take that as an act of war? I suspect they will. And what are we going to do then? Is humanity going to be flushed down the drain because the American dollar has been abused and mishandled to the point where foreigners say no more dollars? Because that's the trajectory we're on right now.
And you're coming to us from Ontario, Canada, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Toronto,
right.
Toronto.
And you know what? It doesn't bode well for our currency either. So I'm not saying that the Canadian dollar is in a better boat than the American dollar. What I'm saying is the people who are the stewards of our fiat money system are destroying the value of fiat money. Which is why, Greg, there's been so much interest and so much demand for physical metal and for cryptocurrencies. Because these like physical metal, it doesn't owe anyone anything. If you hold and own physical metal, you have tangible, tradable worth that's universal and has been universal for thousands of years. If you're holding Bitcoin, Greg, you hold something that by virtue of blockchain, it can't be replicated and sold hundreds of times over, like paper gold can. Every ounce that's held in reserve at an entity like COMEX or on the LBMA, you see, the reality is, Greg, if you have a physical ounce in your possession, you own the physical ounce. You can do with it as you please. But when you buy futures and buy unallocated contracts for gold and silver, promises of gold and silver on the LBMA, you don't know how many owners, the physical ounces backing that contract that you're holding, you don't know how many owners the real physical metal backing that contract really has.
How close are we to this thing, in your estimation? Because you also do this, you arrange tonnage for people you have in the past. How close are we for this, the gold and silver market, them just, blowing up, them just not being able to deliver any metal? I mean, what signs do you see that this thing's getting really tight?
Well, Greg, I view geopolitical tensions as the thermometer measuring the temperature of that water. And the more geopolitical tension we have in the world, to me, it's indicative of us getting closer and closer to the dollar being rejected globally. So you tell me what the temperature is right now in terms of global geopolitical tensions. We have America and China name calling back and forth, saying that each other have created this virus situation. The Americans saying the Chinese are responsible, and the Chinese are saying the Americans are responsible.
Well, we know the Chinese are responsible.
Greg, right now, we don't know. Frankly, I don't think we know whether, there's talk about whether this was created in a lab. There's talk about whether this came out of nature. The fact that nobody can agree on anything, Greg, is symptomatic of geopolitical turmoil. And the geopolitical turmoil has a root. The geopolitical turmoil's root is the money's no good, Greg. And that's why people are at each other's throats. That's why we can't get along in the world. It's got nothing to do at its root with a virus. It's got nothing to do with the color of people's skin. You see, people who want to initiate, or people that want to create difficulties in the world. I mean, the classic globalist game plan is divide and conquer. And they don't care who they're dividing or who they're conquering. Their game is just to muddy the water, divide and conquer. And that's why we have black being pitted against white. That's why we have yellow being pitted against white. That's why we have, and that's what's at the root of all this geopolitical tension. And to me, it all comes back to the money. You see, Greg, when you have dishonest commerce, that is no basis for geopolitical calmness or geopolitical friendliness, and that creates problems. You know why? People inherently know when they're getting screwed, Greg.
The money's no good.
The money's no good. And it all boils back to the money. The money stinks. And people inherently know when they're getting screwed, and people don't want to take lesser value in return for their work and their labor and their resources. And that's why the dollar's being called into question, and that's why we are seeing the manic rises in gold, silver, and Bitcoin, and or any other cryptocurrency.
Do you think we'll be forced into a reset? I got people who write me in the background. They say there's a reset underway. It has to happen. It's just a reset of the debt. They said it has to happen. That will end up.
It's occurring. It's occurring all around us.
You think the reset must happen? I think Trump was to put it off till 2021. He knows it. He knows that when he walked into office, he had 40 trillion overt and covert debt at least. They didn't stop milking that cow after 2015. You were marked out 98 to 2015. Well, what happened in 16 and 17 and 18 and 19? They just stopped milking trillions of dollars out? I mean,
no,
they just stopped
trillions more were milked out of the system in all those years, Greg. You see, and what it really comes back to...
We don't have proof that it happened, but it's...
You see, Greg, the real reality is we don't know how much money there really is. We have no clue. And all we have are the lies that were given by officialdom saying that there's X amount of money in the world. And the reality is there's factors more than that in existence. And it's, you see, Greg, and it's showing up in ways that, you can measure. I mean, why, Greg, if money is as tight as officialdom would have us believe, why are record prices being paid for fine art all over the world? Why are collectibles fetching record upon record upon record price? You see, this is all illustrative of and indicative of there being too much money. And people talk about there being shortages of dollars, and yet, fine artwork receives customarily record prices all over the world.
How does this end? How does this end, Rob? How do you envision this ending?
It ends with rejection of the dollar in global trade. That's where we're headed. The dollar will be rejected in global trade, and whether the custodians or the keepers of the dollar, like as I said earlier, whether they take the rejection of the currency that they've destroyed on their own, of their own will, whether they take that as an act of war, that's anybody's guess. And if they do take it as an act of war and react accordingly, humanity has a very, very dark chapter coming. But these guys are all in. Greg, they're all in and they're committed. and they're crazy.
And they announced it on 60 Minutes and other places that they were going to do whatever it takes. They were going to print they could print unlimited amounts of money. I don't know the exact, but that's what they were saying. They could print as much as they wanted. They could, nothing will default. We can print as much as we want. I mean, even Powell said
exactly, Greg. So Greg, the translation of that, the translation of what you just said, these people who have created a problem with too much debt are saying that we will fix the problem by creating more debt. Okay? You see, Greg, when you dig a hole and the hole gets really deep, the solution to getting out of the deepest hole you've ever been in your life is to put down the shovel and stop digging. But these guys think that they can dig the hole deeper and somehow absolve themselves of the deepness of the hole they're already in.
Well, I hate to say it, but it worked since the 2008-2009 crisis. I mean, they funneled the debt and had QE1 and 2 and twist and overt and covert money printing, and they let criminals rig the LIBOR and gold and silver and futures and Forex. And I mean, we just had this carnival cartoon of a financial system, right? I mean,
and that's exactly
they did dig the hole. They did make it work by digging the hole deeper the last time.
Yeah, and David Copperfield makes Learjets disappear, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's quite an illusion, isn't it, Greg?
Yes, it's my family. I say that because they don't watch what I do. My family thinks I'm absolutely crazy. They just say, what? You're printing money, trillions of dollars? What? Come on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I gave some money to cash to one of my nephews. They didn't watch this, so it's okay. And so he tells my wife, she says, you got the money, right? Yeah, but I haven't had time to put it in the bank so I can put it on my debit card.
Yeah. Well, here. But you know what, Greg? How long do people want to believe? You ask how long can this go on? How long are people going to be entertained with magical entertainers who make Learjets disappear? Do Learjets really disappear behind curtains?
Do you think we get the reset this year or next year?
I think it could happen. You see, 2 or 3 years ago, Greg, I thought we had months or years for this to play out. Now I think we're down to days or weeks.
You think it'll happen this year?
This whole situation, Greg, could fold up like a cheap suitcase. It could fold up, between now and the end of the year. I rather suspect we're going to see some measure of dollar rejection before the end of the year. Yeah, I believe we will.
I think Trump, who's, this is, he had, as I said, he had 40 trillion a day he walked into office. So, okay, so I'm going to stop it right now and implode the economy? No. What's another 2, 3, 4 trillion, 10 trillion? It doesn't make any difference. We're not paying it back. Right? We're not paying it back.
Well,
Greg, we never intended to pay any of this back. That's just the American currency. It doesn't count
the amounts involved, Greg, are too big to pay back.
Oh.
And so we either have a default, or we have a rejection of the dollar,
which is a default.
And a default amounts to rejection of the dollar, because if America defaults on the current debt, people will stop taking the existing dollar in return in trade, and the creation of ever more trillions of American dollars will ultimately lead to foreigners rejecting the dollar. So we're in a very difficult position right now. There are people that have talked about debt jubilee. Historically, debt jubilees have happened, but the people who control our world today, I don't believe are ever going to allow a debt jubilee to occur, because that would ultimately be an admission that everything they've done has failed. And the people that control the dollar have demonstrated that they have no interest in admitting that they've been part and parcel to the failure. So we're in a tough spot, and how we get out of it, I don't know collectively how we get out of it, I do know that people can somewhat insulate themselves by allocating some of their worth to some of these alternatives, which should leave you in a relatively better position than those who don't. So we're getting to a point where it's going to be, protect yourself where and when nobody else will. And that's
go ahead. And that's
it's a matter of being, taking your future and taking your being responsible for yourself. I mean, you can't stop others from behaving irresponsibly, but you can make good choices for yourself and for your family, regardless of whether anybody else is going to follow the same path. So, and that's a personal choice people have to make for themselves.
Rob Kirby, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com for a pretty sobering lesson. And this is where the money supply is going, folks. I mean, it's probably up here somewhere. It's off the charts. It's going crazy. We went from $3.7 trillion in September to doubling the money supply. That's the official. That's what they're willing to tell you. They doubled it in 6 months.
And Greg, that's not the clandestine money supply. And the clandestine money supply is, I'm just going to tell you, factors bigger than that.
Yeah, I know. It's astronomical. What could go wrong? Rob Kirby, KirbyAnalytics.com is the website. You have a brand new article up there. I'm going to link to your homepage. You can see it right on the homepage. You also have subscription service. You have one-on-one contact with some of your members. It's a good service. It's $145 a year.
Yep.
$145 a year, and you get Rob Kirby, who's fairly a fairly consistent writer of new material and new stuff for his subscribers, and to let you know what's going on that you won't hear in the mainstream media. I mean, you listen to Rob Kirby, you say, what do you mean that? Huh? You were bringing up this exponential curve, which I know Chris Martenson also did, but you've been hitting that, saying at some point it's going to go exponential. And sure enough, you have been right. It certainly is, just by all the over.
You know what, Greg? Whether people want to acknowledge it or not, at some point they will be forced to deal with it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I got you. Rob Kirby, KirbyAnalytics.com. His subscription page, I'll link to that. The home page, he's got a brand new article. Rob Kirby, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
It's been my pleasure, Greg.